The clinking of champagne glasses was the soundtrack to my public execution. I just didn't know it yet. My husband stood on stage, ready to toast his parents' enduring love, but instead he blew up our entire world with a single, brutal announcement. The clinking of champagne glasses was the soundtrack to my public execution. I just didn't know it yet. My mother-in-law, Carol, was glowing. She deserved to. 40 years of marriage to a man who still looked at her like she was the only woman in the world was something to celebrate. The garden of their beautiful home was strung with fairy lights that twinkled like fallen stars, casting a soft, forgiving glow on the faces of their closest friends and family. I'd spent the week helping her with the arrangements, tasting cakes, and choosing flowers. We'd laughed, shared stories. She'd squeezed my hand at one point and said, "You're the daughter I always wanted, you know." The memory felt like a shard of glass in my chest now. My husband, Mark, stood beside me, a perfect portrait of the doting son and loving husband. One arm was draped casually around my waist, but I could feel the tension in his fingers. To everyone else, we were a power couple, the natural successors to his parents' legacy of enduring love. They didn't see the weeks of strained silence, the late nights at the office, or the way he'd started looking through me instead of at me. I'd been trying desperately to fix whatever was broken. I suggested therapy. He said he was too busy. I planned a romantic weekend away. He canceled at the last minute because of a work emergency. Still, I'd held on to hope. I thought this party, surrounded by the testament of his parents' love, might be the spark we needed. How naive I was. "If I could have everyone's attention," Mark's voice boomed, rich and confident. He tapped his glass with a fork and a hush fell over the 50 or so guests. He left my side and walked to the small, makeshift stage near the fountain, his posture radiating a charm that had always been his greatest weapon. I watched him, my heart doing a familiar, stupid little flutter. Maybe this was it. Maybe seeing his parents so happy would remind him of what we were fighting for. He started beautifully, of course. He spoke of his parents' journey, their unwavering support for one another, their shared laughter and quiet strength. "They are the gold standard," he said, raising his glass to them. "A testament to love, commitment, and partnership. They taught me everything I know about what it means to build a life with someone." Carol was dabbing her eyes with a napkin, and my father-in-law was beaming. I felt a surge of pride, a flicker of the man I had fallen in love with. Then, his eyes, which had been sweeping the crowd, landed on me. The warmth in them vanished, replaced by a cold, glittering resolve. My breath caught in my throat. Something was wrong. "And it's because of the honesty they instilled in me," he continued, his voice dropping slightly, drawing everyone in, "that I can't stand up here and pretend. I can't pretend that all marriages are destined for such a happy milestone." A nervous ripple went through the crowd. I could feel dozens of eyes shift from him to me. My smile felt like it was cracking on my face. My hand, resting on the table, started to tremble. What was he doing? Some marriages, unfortunately, run their course. They crumble under the weight of secrets and broken promises. He held my gaze, a silent accusation passing between us that only I could understand. My mind raced. What secrets? What promises? My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. He took a deep breath, puffing out his chest like a man about to perform an act of great bravery instead of gut-wrenching cruelty. "And that's why, in the spirit of honesty my parents taught me, I have to announce that my wife and I will be getting a divorce." The silence was absolute. It was so profound you could have heard a single rose petal drop onto the manicured lawn. Every single person was staring at me. My blood turned to ice water, then to fire, rushing to my cheeks. I was pinned in place by their pity, their shock, their morbid curiosity. I saw Carol's face, her smile frozen in a rictus of confusion and horror. Mark wasn't done, though. He wanted to twist the knife. He wanted to make sure everyone knew who the villain was in his little tragedy. "It's a difficult, painful decision," he said, his voice thick with fake emotion, "but a necessary one. It's a shame, really." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the weight of his next words settle before he even spoke them. He looked right at me, a cruel small smile playing on his lips. "It's a shame she couldn't show me the same loyalty she so easily gives to others." The world tilted on its axis. His words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous, seeping into the stunned silence. Loyalty. She so easily gives to others. It wasn't just an announcement. It was an execution. He had handed the gun to every guest and painted a target on my back. I could feel their eyes on me, a physical weight of judgment. I saw my friend Anna's horrified expression, my cousin's gaping mouth. Every smile I had shared, every laugh I had enjoyed just minutes before, felt like a lie. He had rewritten our entire history in 30 seconds, casting me as the cheating wife and himself as the noble, heartbroken husband. My first instinct was to shrink, to disappear, to let the perfectly manicured lawn swallow me whole. My face burned with a humiliation so profound it felt like a physical blow. But then I saw his mother, Carol. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. But her horror wasn't directed at me. It was aimed squarely at her own son, standing on that stage like a conquering hero. She took a step towards me, her hand outstretched, her mouth forming a silent no. That single gesture was a lifeline. It cut through the paralysis. He expected me to cry. He expected me to run away in shame. He expected me to be the weak, hysterical woman he had just painted me to be. And in that instant, a cold, hard fury solidified in my veins. He would not get what he wanted. I stood up. The scraping of my chair was deafening in the still air. All movement, all whispers ceased. I felt 100 pairs of eyes follow me as I walked, my steps impossibly steady towards the stage. Mark's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second. This wasn't in his script. I reached him, and without a word, I gently took the microphone from his stunned hand. His fingers went limp, and he let it go. I turned to face the crowd, our friends, our family. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs, but I held the microphone with a steady grip. "Wow," I said, my voice barely a whisper at first, but it carried in the silent garden. I cleared my throat and spoke again, louder this time. "Wow, Mark, I have to hand it to you. I knew you were a coward, but this is a masterpiece." A collective gasp went through the audience. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes locked on Mark. His face was starting to turn a blotchy red. "You want to talk about loyalty?" I asked, my voice dripping with a scorn I didn't know I possessed. "You want to stand here on the night we're celebrating 40 years of your parents' devotion and talk about loyalty?" I took a step closer to him, lowering my voice so only he and those in the front could hear, but the microphone carried every word. "Let's be honest, shall we? Since that's the theme of the evening. The loyalty you're referring to, is it the loyalty I have for my own brother?" I let that sink in, turning my gaze back to the crowd. My brother, as some of you know, has been struggling. He's been fighting a battle that Mark here deemed too inconvenient to be a part of. The secrets he mentioned, that was me, taking money from our joint account to pay for my brother's treatment. The treatment Mark refused to help with because it might affect our application for a new boat loan. The narrative was shifting. I could feel it. The looks of pity were turning into looks of confusion, then dawning anger directed at him. I saw his father clench his jaw, his eyes like chips of ice. Mark was sputtering, trying to grab the microphone back, but I held it tight. "You're twisting things," he hissed, his charming facade crumbling to reveal the snarling pettiness beneath. "Am I?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. I turned back to our guests, my voice clear and strong. "Mark is right about one thing. Our marriage is over. It's been over for a while. It ended the moment he decided a new speedboat was more important than my brother's life." I looked directly at Carol, whose eyes were now filled with tears, not of sadness for her son, but of empathy for me. I gave her the smallest, most reassuring nod I could muster. Then I turned back to Mark for the final blow. I handed him back the microphone. "So, you go ahead, Mark. Continue your toast. Since we're all about honesty now, why don't you tell your parents and all our friends about Project Renewal?" I let the name hang in the air, watching the color drain completely from his face. He knew exactly what I was talking about. "Better yet," I added, my voice dropping to a stage whisper that the mic picked up perfectly. "Why don't you explain the charge for $2,000 at the Elysian Fields Resort on our credit card last month? I didn't realize your consulting project involved a couple's massage." Mark's face went from pale to a ghastly shade of green. The name of the resort, a ridiculously opulent couple's retreat an hour out of town, hung in the air like a guillotine poised over his neck. He opened his mouth, but only a strangled croak came out. He looked cornered, a rat trapped in the glare of 100 headlights. The silence stretched for an agonizing 10 seconds before it was shattered by his father. "Mark." His father's voice was low, but it cut through the garden with the force of a thunderclap. "Is this true?" Mark couldn't look at him. He couldn't look at anyone. His carefully constructed world, built on lies and charm, had been demolished in less than 5 minutes. All that was left was the ugly, pathetic truth. He shoved the microphone stand away with a clatter and practically fled, pushing past shocked guests without a word, disappearing into the shadows of the house. The coward's exit. For a moment, nobody moved. The party was dead, the fairy lights now seeming to mock the grim reality of the evening. Then Carol moved. She walked right up to me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, and wrapped her arms around me in a fierce hug. "I am so sorry, my dear," she whispered into my hair. "So sorry." Over her shoulder, I saw Mark's father walk over, his face a mask of disappointment and fury. He put a hand on my arm. "The house is yours as long as you need it," he said gruffly. "He won't be back tonight." It wasn't just an offer. It was a promise, a declaration of allegiance. In their son's moment of ultimate betrayal, they had chosen me. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift and brutal. My phone lit up with texts and calls from friends who had been at the party, all offering support, all disgusted with Mark's behavior. The story of his grand, backfiring announcement spread like wildfire through our social circle. He became a pariah overnight. The Project Renewal I'd mentioned wasn't a consulting gig. It was the nickname he and his mistress had given their affair. She was a junior associate at his firm, and the credit card statement was just the tip of the iceberg. My lawyer, armed with the statement and a few key witness accounts from the party, had a field day. Mark tried to fight it, of course. He sent me rambling, pathetic emails alternating between begging for forgiveness and blaming me for airing our dirty laundry. He claimed I had ruined his reputation. I simply forwarded the emails to my lawyer and blocked his number. His reputation was his own to ruin. I had just turned on the lights so everyone could see it. The divorce was messy, but not for me. With his parents firmly on my side, refusing to fund his legal battle or offer him any emotional support until he took responsibility for his actions, he crumbled. He had no leverage, no sympathy, and no money to fight. He'd played his big dramatic card at the party and was left with an empty hand. I got everything: the house, a generous settlement, and most importantly, my freedom. The day the divorce was finalized, Carol and I went out for lunch. We didn't talk much about Mark. We talked about the future, about the trip to Italy she'd always wanted to take, about the small business I was thinking of starting with the money from the settlement. The shame he'd tried to brand me with had vanished, replaced by a quiet, steely strength I never knew I had. He'd tried to make me the villain of his story, but in the end, he only revealed himself as the fool. Last week, I was packing up the last of his things from the house-tacky golf trophies and suits that suddenly looked cheap when I found a photo album from the anniversary party. I flipped through the first few pages. Guests laughing, his parents cutting the cake, a picture of me and Carol arranging flowers just hours before it all imploded. Then I got to the pictures taken during the speeches. There was one of Mark on the stage, his face alight with smug cruelty as he made his announcement. And then there was a picture of me. I was walking towards him, my back straight, my eyes blazing. I didn't look broken or ashamed. I looked like a warrior. He had meant for that night to be my end, the grand finale of my humiliation. But looking at that photo, I realized it wasn't an ending at all. It was the beginning,